Hello chess friends and welcome to Zara of Chess channel and welcome back to the mega match between Stockfish 13 against Lila C0. So as we mentioned before, this mega match was set up like this. These two engines had to battle it out in very some irregular and bad openings. For instance, they had to play many times the Grob opening with the move G4, or their response to natural openings like E4 or D4 had to be really a bad move, for instance like H6 or A6. So basically the engines were pretty much forced from the beginning to play bad openings. The engine that has of course the disadvantage is battling for a draw. The engine that has an advantage of course is battling for a win. But we have seen also some problems by Lila C0 when Stockfish played, for instance, in one particular game the first move H3. Then still Stockfish managed to brutalize Lila C0 with an immortal game. We have covered also that game. So among many great gambits, we haven't covered actually one of the greatest gambits of all times. It's one of the gambits that my father used to teach me when I was a kid, and I almost forgot about this opening because it's really one of the sharpest gambits that you can play or that you can face, of course, and it's the so-called Danish gambit. The Danish gambit is really one of the wildest gambits. And as I said, I almost forgot about my first love in chess, about my first gambit that I knew about. And be prepared, the Danish gambit is really one of the sickest gambits that you can play here, and as I said, that you can face, because in my opinion I will not play the Danish gambit, never, I think, in an important game, because the Danish gambit I don't like to play. I don't know how to play it, but also I don't know how to play against the Danish gambit, because if I face the Danish gambit I will try to avoid it. I'll try to make a different line because it's so wild. The tactics are all over the board, so be prepared. This is, as the title says, simply opening created for Stockfish 13. So let's check out now the game here. E4 played by Stockfish 13. We have E5 by Lila C0, and we have now D4, the center game. After E takes D4, of course you can take queen to D4, knight to C6 can happen, and then of course black gets a tempo. But that wasn't the prearranged line. The prearranged line was now the Danish gambit with the move C3. We're simply giving up a pawn. After the move D takes C3, again you can take, and I think this would be still a good line for white, because you broke your knight out with a tempo. Still you have the centralized pawn, and now I think the main thing that white is relying on is a fast activity with bishop to c4, then knight to f3, maybe bishop to g5, bishop to f4. So still playable here for white. But here after move d takes c3, still the prearranged line was now the sickest of Danish gambits. It's the move now bishop to c4, and now after the move c takes b2, we have bishop to b2, and now queen to e7 was the last prearranged move here by the organizer. And you see now what white as a compensation is of course a huge bishop's activity, but of course white is 2 pawns down. And actually this move queen to e7 is not the best move here for black. A better continuation here for black is to play the move bishop to b4, but as we said, queen to e7 is still the prearranged line. But still I think we should cover some lines also that are good for black. If we move bishop to b4, now white could play something like knight to c3, knight to f6, and now after queen to b3, you see we can simply take bishop takes c3, queen to c3, and now castling is, I think, very important now for black. Black has to go now into this line. You see again black has a lack of development. The pieces have to get out. Somehow you cannot take the pawn on e4 because you get checkmated on g7. But as I said, this would be maybe playable here for black. Queen to e7, as we mentioned, not the best of moves, but it gives only a slightly edge here for white. So white is slightly better, like white is usually in the opening. So of course white is always a slightly advantage in the opening. Now after move queen to e7, at least Stockfish is not starting the game with a -1 position or something. Now Stockfish has of course the opportunity to attack this position further. So knight to c3, normal development. And you see now we have already 3 pieces out, although we're down 2 pawns here from white perspective, but at least we have a great piece activity. So knight to f6, challenging the pawn, and here Stockfish decides to sacrifice another pawn with the move knight to e2. So no problem here. If you want to take out, if you try knight takes e4, then we can simply castle, and now you see g6 is not a possibility because you get simply knight to d5 discoveries, and here also the rook could be hanging. You can even take if you want here maybe immediately the knight, but as I said, I think knight to d5 is the best of moves. So here if you try d6 after you took the pawn, the taking out the pawn is not an option here for black. If you take out the pawn, you get punished simply too much. Again, knight to d5 will happen, queen to d8, rook to e1. You see how these pieces can get active. If you try bishop to e7, knight to g3, and now if you take knight takes g3 first, of course we're taking the bishop. Now after trades of pieces, you can maybe take out this knight, but we'll take out also this knight. And of course white is much better. These bishops are aiming towards the king. The queen will be included, queen to e2 or queen to f3, rook to e1, and black is simply tactically lost here. So as said, after move knight to e2, it's like Leela C0 is saying, okay, I have had enough pawns, I don't want to now take out the centralized pawn, because there is sometimes this defensive strategy, it's this hiding behind your enemy's pawns. So you see now at least this pawn on e4 is protecting the queen and the king on the e file, because now if the rook comes on the e file, at least this pawn on e4 is standing in the way. So this is simply something that Leela is relying here on, simply this kind of a defense, because if the e file gets open and you have of course the queen and the king on the same file, then you could face really some great tactical problems. So that's why here Leela C0 tried d5 in order to somehow activate these pieces, because the pieces are out of game so far. The bishop is not good, the knight is not good, and what Leela C0 is of course trying to do after fast development of minor pieces, to simply castle queenside and then maybe secure the king like this, and maybe go into a favorable mid game. As we said, still black has of course 2 pawns up. So here after move d5, we have knight to d5, knight to d5, and now after move bishop to d5, here with the move c6, Stockfish gets challenged, and you can guess what Stockfish does. Stockfish plays here simply bishop to b3. No, I'm just kidding. Stockfish never retreats. After move c6 here, Stockfish simply castles. Stockfish castles and challenges now Leela C0. As we said, our main tactical goal here from white's perspective is to open the e file. Even if we have to sacrifice maybe one piece, that's actually the cool part of this game. Here in move 10 already, Stockfish sacrificed now the bishop. After move c takes d5, we have e takes d5, and now mission accomplished. Although Stockfish is down a whole piece, but still these tactical problems on the e file are something that bothering now Leela through the whole game. You cannot develop your dark square bishop. That's the main issue with some ideas of g6, because this bishop is very dangerous, and now the knight will find the way into the game. Knight to d4, maybe knight to b5, maybe even knight to c7, rook to e1, rook to c1, the queen can sneak in. So it's a great activity, because you see all of these pieces of blacks are simply on the starting square. They're all on the 8th rank, so that's why here already a very interesting position, although the engine gives again equal chances for both sides. But as we said, at least white has an idea how to attack further this position. After move e takes d5, queen to d6. So here Leela C0 gets at least with one piece out of the range of the potential activity of the rook on the e file. So at least one piece is out. Now we're trying to play bishop to e7 as fast as we can, and then maybe try kingside castling. So here rook to e1. Stockfish smells blood again. Stockfish, as we said, is simply attacking this position further. Bishop to e7, but now bishop to g7. You see, you cannot castle on the king side because rook to g8 had to happen, and now queen to c2. A great counter attack. You see, we're attacking now the bishop on c8. If you take now rook to g7, this wasn't played in the game, it's not so good. You get simply queen takes c8. You have to cover with the queen and the bishop, no problem there, but still you can do this one, queen to b7, and now you would be forced to play knight to d7 in order to protect your rook. But now still this idea knight to d4 is very dangerous, with ideas of knight to f5. Maybe you could try knight to c5 as the best line, counter-attacking the queen, but still queen to c6 could happen, and here king to f8. Maybe you could secure the king here from black's perspective like this, but now knight to f5 still very dangerous. Still, it's such a complicated game here for black, so that's why here I think white is much better. This bishop is hanging, the rook is hanging, the knight is also attacked, so that's why I think black is again simply tactically lost. So after move queen to c2, you see taking out the bishop is not an option here, so that's why king to d8 protecting the bishop, and now Leela C0 takes another pawn. Queen takes h7 attacking the rook, and now rook to e8, queen to c2. Again Leela C0 took a pawn, retreats with the queen on a very active square, because as we always said in many of our videos, the queen is a long range piece, so the queen has still a great activity, although it's on c2 and maybe not centralized so far, but still with great attacking opportunities. What the main issue now is now for black, that white has now also a pass pawn here on the h file, well, this pass pawn will be very important, because many pieces are now deflected to the queen side. When we watch now black's structure here, as we said, still these pieces are on starting square, so far not a good position here for black. Knight to a6 by Lila c0, and now knight to d4, simply getting our pieces better and better in the game. And now queen to g6. If we try here something like bishop to f6, maybe to simplify the game, I've analyzed, for instance, this line. If you try maybe to trade off more pieces to, as we said, simplify the game, it's not so good, because you get simply rook to e8, and after king to e8, rook to e1 will happen. You see how bad it is, because you didn't activate your rook so far. After the move rook to e1, king to d8 maybe again, but now knight to e6 would be the stunner, I think. Let's see possible continuation. After f takes e6, we have bishop to f6. That's the most important thing here. And now after king to d7, here queen to h7, and it's simply a forced checkmate. So king to e8 could happen. Now queen to g8 with the check, and you can maybe cover here with the queen to f8, but now simply rook takes e6, bishop to e6, and now here queen to e6. You can again only cover with the queen, and now queen takes e7. It's checkmate. So really wild stuff. So as we said, bishop to f6, not a good opportunity, because you get this one, this very nice intermediate check. Knight to e6, cutting off the connection between the queen and the bishop, and then the bishop becomes really the best piece on the board. So really wild stuff. So after the move knight to d4, here queen to g6, played by Lila c0, trying again, as we said, black's main strategical and tactical goal here is simply to trade off more pieces, going into favorable middle game, end game stage, where we have, of course, one piece up. But now if you move queen to g6, of course, Stockfish 13 is not interested in trading off more pieces, plays now a very nice x-ray attack here, because if you take now here queen takes g7, then of course you get the fork, knight to e6, discover the attack against the queen, and you can resign the game immediately. So but here Lila c0 tried something else. Lila c0 tried here to move bishop to b4, attacking the queen, trying to kick away the queen, and then maybe to try somehow to take out this bishop, because the trading idea when the queen was on c2 wasn't possible. So now after move bishop to b4, it seems so that many pieces are hanging. So it seems maybe that even something went wrong here for Stockfish, but you know how Stockfish calculates his tactics, no problems here. The best way actually here to defend this position is this move, bishop to g4. It's the only move that helps out Lila c0. So bishop to b4 is also not so good. After bishop to g4, queen to a5 would be now a forced line here for white, at least attacking the king. Now knight to c7 would be an opportunity. Now again, not queen to c3, but now maybe bishop to e5. Here at least continuing our pin against the knight. And now maybe after something like b6, bishop takes c7, after king to c7, now maybe d6. We want to open now some more files against black's king. After bishop to d6, now rook to c1, attacking further the position, and now after rook to bishop to c5, rook to c5, that would be actually the only way to defend this position for black. You cannot take, of course, the rook because of the pin by the queen against the pawn and the king, so that's why you would be forced to play king to b7. But now after rook to b5, this the engine here at home says this is a 0.0 position for both sides. Now we can of course trade off more pieces, rook to e1, queen to e1, but maybe black can hang on to this position somehow, getting the queen maybe more towards the king, and somehow create a compact position, because it's almost like black managed to castle here with the rook to c8. The idea is somehow, as we said, bringing more pieces towards the king and try to hang on to this position. But as we said, here bishop to b4, bishop to g4 may be slightly better. At least we're developing some more pieces. After bishop to b4, it's basically one-way ticket here for Stockfish 13. Here Stockfish plays now again an immortal move, knight to c6. Look at this sick tactic again. So the bishop is hanging, the queen is hanging, the knight is hanging on c6. If you take now b takes c6, for instance, if you try this line, it's not so good. You get simply bishop to f6, and if you try to cover here with bishop to e7, then you get queen to a5 again this very annoying check. And now after knight to c7, this is not working anymore, because you get d6. d6 is the stunning tactic. Basically black is even checkmated. You can try maybe just to prolong the game with queen to g2 and similar ideas. There's no way anymore to defend this, and to defend this knight on c7. So Here you could also try king to d7, but we can then, of course, if you don't react here, if you don't take out the knight, then we can simply take out the bishop on b4, knight to b4, and it's of course a much better position here for white. So queen to b4, again with some ideas, rook takes e8 followed with rook to e1. Again, black is simply tactically lost. So here after move knight to c6, you see now the problems in black's position. Again, the bishop is undeveloped, the rook is undeveloped here. Lila c0 tries a counterattack with queen to c6 because also this queen is hanging, but now Stockfish has bishop to f6, a very nice switch and took a very nice attack here. King to c7, and now queen to g3. Here queen to d6 was played. If you try bishop to d6, it's again not so good because you lose simply the rook here. Rook takes e8. You can maybe try bishop takes g3, but now again we take. You can maybe retreat with your bishop, but we can simply take out this pawn after king to b7. Here again we have pointed out earlier that this pass pawn is very annoying, so with the support of these two rooks, again black is simply lost. The engine gives here 2.5 position here for white. So that's why after move queen to g3, queen to d6 was played, trying to trade off the pieces. Here rook to c1, you see how Stockfish activates now every piece into the game. Knight to c5, queen takes d6, and now after king takes d6, you see this rook is hanging, so it was the position was simply overloaded here for black. Here we have b6, rook to d8, and now after rook to c4 attacking the bishop, we have a5. But now, pardon me, let's go back here. Queen takes d6, though this was the position. You see now h4. Now Stockfish is simply pushing this pawn further. We have h5, bishop to d2. This passer is now basically unstoppable. Here f4, cutting off here the connection between the bishop and the square h6. Now h6 is a serious threat, so that's why bishop to e3, check, king to h1. We have king to d6, and now h6 proceeding here. Bishop to e4, and now rook to e4. A very nice sacrifice, again simply sacrificing the rook for the exchange, but the knight cannot catch up anymore with this pawn. The problem is now also this bishop is covering this diagonal. Very nice endgame tactics here by Stockfish. We have bishop to e5 first to check, and now h7, knight to f2 check, knight to g4 no problem, knight takes e5. It's again not a problem because we have f takes e5, and this diagonal is simply covered. Here you can try maybe bishop to f4, but now Stockfish simply promoted now queen, and it was of course a completely winning endgame here for Stockfish. So bishop to e5, queen here takes the pawn, a couple of checks, so we're not analyzing now so much this endgame. g4, simply pushing the pawn further. Bishop to b4, we have a g5, g6, g7, here king to d3, another queen is out, here check again, and after queen to e2 it was a checkmate. So brilliant stuff in the Danish Gambit. I haven't covered the Danish Gambit game on my YouTube chess channel. I'm sorry about that. I think we'll cover the Danish Gambit more and more. I'll create now also a separate playlist of the Danish Gambit. We can analyze this very tricky opening line maybe in the future more. It's very aggressive. You see, you get a piece activity for 2 pawns, but be careful with gambits. You know, sometimes gambits can go wrong, and as I said, I still don't dare to play the Danish Gambit, but I even don't dare to play against the Danish Gambit, so that's why I try something else. So I played more calm lines, but this was really beautiful game by Stockfish 13. Stockfish showed us basically how we should play this Danish Gambit. Of course, there are also some other great lines for black, and also some other great opportunities for black, but it was, I think, a very interesting game here by the fish. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more brutal attacks like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series. Here's the link of our games that we have analyzed so far, and if you want to see the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.